We'll start this one in the United States, where the House of Representatives will vote on a single article of impeachment later today that accuses outgoing President Trump of inciting a mob that resulted in the Capitol building being ransacked and 5 people died. During a visit to Texas yesterday, Trump was unapologetic and dismissed the historic impeachment move as, quote, a vicious witch hunt. From the U.S. Capitol, our Special Correspondent John Cookson reports.
Trump did what he always does when he's under fire, deny everything, and in his case take no responsibility for his role in fomenting violent rioting at the U.S. Capitol last week.
So if you read my speech, and many people have done it, and I've seen it both in the papers and in the media, on television, it's been analyzed, and people thought that what I said was totally appropriate. And if you look at what other people have said, politicians at a high level, about the riots during the summer, the horrible riots in Portland and Seattle and various other places, that was a real problem, what they said. But they've analyzed my speech and my words and my final paragraph, my final sentence, and everybody to the T thought it was totally appropriate.
The Democrats control the House of Representatives, so it's likely in these extraordinary times that Donald Trump will become the first U.S. president to be impeached not once but twice. The charge that he incited an insurrection, a fact that historians will refer to for many years to come.
I'm a co-sponsor of the articles of impeachment. As soon as I got back to my office on Wednesday from the secure location, I decided it was very important that we called for impeachment. I think we need to hold President Trump and anyone who incited, encouraged, or committed these acts of violence accountable. I know from my experience that the first time an incident like this happens, the first time you have an attempted coup, which is what this was, you have to have the highest level of accountability to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. And that's why I feel so strongly that we need to get President Trump out of office. And I'm hopeful that Vice President Pence and the cabinet will do the right thing.
Security outside the Capitol building has been low key until now. But when the impeachment vote takes place later today, it will be ramped up massively as Washington and the rest of America holds its breath. John Cookson, Arise News, Washington.
The political situation in the United States is still very fluid and increasingly tense, and has not been helped in any way by yesterday's remarks by President Trump. Speaking for the first time since last week's violence by his supporters at the Capitol, which has been blamed on his divisive rhetoric, Trump denied responsibility and went ahead to describe the ongoing impeachment moves against him by House Democrats as a host that is causing tremendous anger across the land. Joining us now from Washington, D.C. for further updates on this story is John Cookson, Arise Special Correspondent. Good morning, John. Good to have you again this morning on the program. Well, so much has happened in the last 24 hours, but it is clear that Vice President Mike Pence is not going to invoke the 25th Amendment. President Trump is also not going to resign. He says it's at zero risk, and that, if anything, all this talk about 25th Amendment and impeachment will backfire on the Joe Biden administration and Joe Biden himself when he assumes office. Is he just bluffing, or is there something he knows that we need to know too?
Hey, good morning, guys. Good to see you. Well, another day of madness and craziness here in Washington. In the hours ahead, in the last few hours, there's been a vote, as you say, in the House of Representatives on the question of whether Donald Trump can be removed under the Article 25, the 25th Amendment of the Constitution. And the vote was 223 Democrats for, 205 Republicans against. So the Dems won the vote. However, it was really symbolic only for the Dems because Mike Pence, as you already said, has decided that he's not going to invoke the 25th Amendment, which really, frankly, is is only used or is meant to be used when a president becomes totally incapacitated. For example, if he goes into a coma or is tragically shot, as in the case of John Kennedy. So Mike Pence there saying that he's not going to invoke the 25th Amendment. So, as I say, that vote largely symbolic, which paves the way now in 7 hours from now. For the House of Representatives to debate another resolution, and this and another extraordinary day, as I say, a resolution that Donald Trump be impeached for the second time. Now, you raise the question of whether this is good for the Democratic Party and the new president who will take office a week today. And it is, as you say, a two-edged sword for Joe Biden. Joe Biden wants to have a smooth transition of power after the extraordinary events of January the 6th, that he says that he wants to heal the nation. So does he really want to go into a trial of Donald Trump, who will be gone anyway in a week from now? It is a dilemma for Biden, but behind him there are many, many Democrats who are sensing blood. They want Trump removed. And not only that, they want him to be stopped from taking office ever again and to be stripped of his rights for his pension and for Secret Service protection for the rest of his life. The many Democrats in the party are really going for the jugular here and want to harm Trump as much as possible. Biden, of course, in a difficult position because he, as a new president and leader of the party, has to make that key call. And it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out in the coming weeks and months. Guys?
Indeed, John. The president has been impeached before, but he was acquitted in the trial. What will be different this time around?
Well, the difference this time around is that one could argue that the first time around that was a political hit. It was theatre by the Democrats and all part of the Punch and Judy show that is politics here in America. This is different because it follows an event last week which not only shook the nation but shook the world, frankly, that the Capitol building was stormed, that 5 people were left dead at the end of it, and that Donald Trump, the sitting president, was arguably the man who incited that violence. So this is the key difference between now and a year ago. Now, you raise a question about what difference there will be in the voting of that. You recall, as you said quite rightly, the Senate found him not guilty. This time, there still needs a majority vote in the Senate. And there are 50 votes of the Democrats, and they need 17 more, the Democrats do. That's 17 Republicans to come over and to convict. Now, the big question is, will they do that? So now we had the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, saying last night that he was very happy that Donald Trump was being impeached and that the offences were horrendous. Now, will that tip the balance? Will other Republicans follow? And you'll recall, you may not recall, but I recall 50 years ago, it was the Republicans who turned on their own President Nixon that got rid of Nixon all those years ago. So will the same happen this time with Donald Trump? And there's another point to make is that you have the likes of Mitch McConnell saying that he's pleased that the impeachment process is taking place, but he didn't say, crucially, that he would vote for impeachment, and that's a big difference, guys.
Right, John, great one there. I mean, the drama is replica of Ed Sullivan's show, I should say, what's happening in Washington right about now. But I got 2 questions. The first one will be what Trump specifically said yesterday when he said, some people have looked at my speech and they said it was good. I didn't incite anything. Trump is a very smart man, and that statement was targeted. A couple of days ago, the famous Harvard professor Alan Dershowitz came on Fox. I was talking about how Trump's speech was not incited, and he sided with Trump. So for Trump to say that, you have the likes of Alan Dershowitz that defended him in the first impeachment coming out to say that. What's your take on that? And secondly, there was another call yesterday between the minority leader in the House of Representatives in America, in Congress, and Donald Trump, the same man Trump will call my Kevin. And he told him, he said, Trump, you lost, the game is over. What's the symbolism of that call?
Okay, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, and there will be close regard and what Trump said on the events leading up to the 6th of January, storming of the Capitol. And, you know, does it amount to a high crime and misdemeanor as to what he said? And there is legal opinion that would say that he didn't. And there is a lot of Democrat support here for the idea that he did incite the violence, and that it's really a question for lawyers to sort out. And Donald Trump arguably could be on strong ground here, that he wasn't. He might have encouraged people to walk to march to the Capitol building. But did he actually incite them to storm the Capitol? And that's the big question here, and it will be for the lawyers to work out. Now, crucially, Trump has been taking legal advice in the last few days, and he's been told to tone down his rhetoric. And when he was talking at the Mexico border earlier today, he said that he wasn't in favor of violence, that violence had no place in politics. So he's very clear here that he wants to absolve himself, if you like, for future possible not only impeachment proceedings, but also civil action against him. So his legal advisors have been telling him to tone down the rhetoric, and that's exactly what he started to do.
Well, I mean, there is an alternative proposal on the table by 6 Republican members of the House of Representatives, led by Brian Fitzpatrick. And they're saying that a censure resolution is likely to be a better option. It will attract bipartisan support rather than impeachment proceedings. And their argument is that, look, impeachment may be a bit difficult, and perhaps because, again, there's no way that process can be completed at the level of conviction before inauguration on January 20th. Senate will go on recess, and that will be the end of that process until Congress comes back. So can a president that is no longer sitting, that has left office, still be convicted? What do you think about the censure resolution proposal?
Well, the censure resolution would be much easier to pass, but, you know, the Dems smell blood here. And there is so much division politically and also in the country that I don't think that is really going to be a runner in this particular case. The Democrat Party really want to hit Trump very hard. And just to go back to the point that I made earlier, that they want to strip him of the possibility of him running for office again, and to strip him of his pension and also Secret Service protection. That won't happen if it's purely a censure. If what the Dems want is actually impeachment of Donald Trump, and that's what they're going to go for. So a good idea in practice, and it would be easier to get through the House of Representatives and also crucially in the Senate. But I don't think that's what the Democrat Party, the rank and file of the Democrats, actually want to happen, guys.
Well, John, we had known that Vice President Mike Pence was reluctant to invoke the 25th Amendment even before his letter to Speaker Nancy Pelosi yesterday. But looking at the content of the letter and what he says, I mean, the essence of invoking the 25th Amendment was not for punishment. You know, that he says it's not for moral incapacitation. It is for incapacitation in physical terms. For instance, what we have seen in the past with presidents who had to go in for surgery, like President George Bush. When you look at that, what are your thoughts? Was this convenient for Vice President Mike Pence to make such an excuse to say the essence and the reason for the 25th Amendment is not for punishment, which the Democrats seem to be doing at the moment?
Yes, you're quite right that this amendment is, in case of a president becoming incapacitated in some way, for example, if he goes for an operation or is shot and another president has to take the reins. And it is something which Mike Pence has considered for a long time. Mike Pence, of course, a very loyal supporter of Donald Trump, and he was never going to support the idea of removal under this amendment, and he made that very clear in the days before. So, as I said earlier, this vote just a few hours ago in the House of Representatives was really symbolic more than anything else, and you know, that's what's going on in politics in this country at the moment. It is all about symbolism and the way that this is portrayed in a largely democratic supporting media here. This constant coverage that Americans see from Democrat sources, it surfaces into the media all the time. And this helps the Democrat cause, of course. So it's all about the optics and the symbolism. And this is the way that politics has gone, sadly, in the United States in the last few years since Donald Trump was elected to office. Guys?
That same symbolism was what Trump showed yesterday when he went to Texas and he went to the wall, which was the cardinal point of his campaign, and he addressed the American people and the world at large yesterday. But there was also a symbolism as regards the FBI's address yesterday that was simultaneous with Trump's address in Texas. Can you just take those two events and just help us through the symbolism of the FBI address in the public yesterday and Trump talking in Texas?
Yes, well, the FBI have been saying that they have intelligence that Trump supporters are planning further violence in the coming days. And we haven't talked about how Washington is on standby at the moment, but certainly there's a high level of security in the city at the moment, and that's going to be really ramped up today when the impeachment debate begins. Trump down on the border yesterday, and he was very keen to play down the idea that violence is the way forward. And as I've said earlier, that was because he's taken legal advice on what might affect him in the weeks and months to come, and if he doesn't tone down his stand. And he was very keen to project that idea that he's not in favor of violence. Trump, I expected that he might make some kind of apology, or look, he's a man who's not going to apologize outright, but certainly allude to the fact that he was wrong regarding his remarks leading up to the events on January the 6th. But it never happened. When I watched Trump giving his speech yesterday, he seemed tired, he seemed rambling, talking about his beloved wall. Getting his facts wrong again about the wall. He said that it's complete when it isn't, that only 600 kilometers have been tackled, and there are many more hundreds of kilometers still to be built. But that was Trump at bay, I think, and he was trying to set the scene, I think, for his political future, whatever that might be. Guys?
Well, quickly, the focus has been on President Trump, but definitely other people played a role, like Rudy Giuliani. What kind of punishment should such persons get? I know that the New York State Bar is planning to debar Rudy Giuliani. There is a lot of talk around that. And then there are persons who are saying some of those lawmakers who stood up to frustrate the certification of electoral votes also need to be sanctioned. Their seats need to be declared vacant. Do you see that possibility happening? Particularly now as corporate America is moving away from those particular set of politicians.
Well, corporate America is, but you might also hear later today that there's a huge flight of capital out of America because big business is very worried about some of the policies of Joe Biden when he takes office. So again, there's a counter to the fact that big business appears to be pulling away from Trump and the Republican Party. I think that may only be a temporary measure, and that they might actually come back to support Republicans in the future. As for Giuliani, well, you know, he's a bit of a political chameleon. He's an escape artist, if you like, and his words were definitely stronger than Trump's, that's for sure. Now, whether he's going to face criminal proceedings or indeed civil proceedings, we'll have to wait and see. The situation in America is very much dynamic at the moment. It's in a state of flux. No one quite knows where things are going. The coming days will decide very much the future of everybody, all the characters in this particular play. And we'll have to wait and see what happens after the transition has taken place next week, whether the new administration can calm things down again. My sense of it is that there's a lot of hype, a lot of talk about prosecuting this person and that person and civil proceedings against the likes of Giuliani, as you mentioned. But I think that we are in the peak of emotion at the moment. And until a new administration comes into play next week, then we won't really know which direction this country and which direction politics is actually going to go. Guys?
Well, John, at this point, we'll take a short break, and then when we return, we'll come back to you. Please stay with us. The conversation will still continue. Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News Channel. Still with us is our Arise Special Correspondent who is in Washington, D.C., John Cookson, who has been giving us reports and analysis on the situation in the United States. Thank you, John Cookson, for staying with us. Adesua.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Bati. John, let me ask you, has President-elect Joe Biden said anything concrete to indicate his support for this impeachment move? And President Trump, on the other hand, talks about time to heal, reconciliation, but he keeps sending out the mixed messages, doesn't he?
Biden hasn't come out publicly yet, and I think he's probably biding his time and waiting to see how things play out in the coming days. But clearly there are members of his own party who want Trump out, and they want Trump out before next week. Now, looking at it practically, that's not going to happen because, for an impeachment, there has to be a trial, and there's simply no time for a trial to take place before Trump has actually left office. I think it's interesting to think about how members of the Republican Party are looking at things at the moment. And in the vote today on impeachment, it looks like there'll be 215 Democrats in favor of impeachment. But of course, the Democrat majority in the House of Representatives is razor thin. So they'll be also depending on some Republicans to come over. And let me just talk about Liz Cheney, number 3 Republican in the House of Representatives. And to go back to the points that you were making earlier about language and how important that is, she said that the president, in his speeches ahead of the violence on January the 6th, she tweeted this: "The president summoned the mob. He assembled the mob and lit the flames of the attack. Everything that followed was his doing. None of this would have happened without the president. I will vote to impeach." Now, I wonder how many Republicans also feel the same way. We know at least 5 will vote for impeachment today. Apart from Cheney, there's Kinzinger, Katko, Buttigieg, and also Upton. So 5 Republicans there. Will there be more? It would be very interesting to see how the vote goes today. and really a sign of how things might develop in the coming weeks and months. And don't forget that there'll be the midterms in 2 years from now. Do the Republicans really want to risk their future in the midterms if they vote or appear to vote against the leader of the party, Trump, at the moment? Well, we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. Guys?
I just want to ask you this real quickly, if you can just answer this in about a minute. I talked about the call earlier on between Kevin McCarthy and Trump, which is the minority leader in the House of Congress. The truth is, do you think Kevin McCarthy will vote in favor of the impeachment?
It's difficult to say at the moment. Things are very much in a state of flux. I think we'll have to wait and see how the vote goes today in Congress on impeachment before we know the answer to that particular question. As I say, things are very uncertain in Washington right now.
All right, thank you so much for that. Really appreciate you. That's all we can take.